Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Skylar and it is so good to see you and to have you here with me today. So, if you watched my most recent video, you already know what this one's going to be because I mentioned what I wanted to do. And that's a story time about my relationship trauma, I guess is the best way to put it, and kind of what's happened the last year with different situations and relationships that I've put into and how it has affected me. And when I first started this channel after kind of the first situation happened, I went back and forth if I wanted to share that story or not, or kind of give any actual information. And I had chosen to not do that at that point in time, which I don't regret doing. I think it was fine to start things the way I did, but now I'm at the point where I've had some more things happen. And I think it's important for people to know that they're not alone in this situation. And I know it gets really exhausting and very discouraging when you look around and see a lot of people have the one thing that you just can't figure out or can't make happen. And you start to wonder, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with me that I'm always in this situation? And I see a lot of girls, different stories, different personalities, different walks of life. And so many of them have this one thing in common, and that's that they have a man that loves them and who wants them and who chose them and who continues to pursue a relationship with them despite anything life throws at them. And the thing I've come to a lot is they love them enough to want them and want them enough to stay. And I'm at this point where I don't understand what I'm doing wrong or what about me is not good enough or not desirable enough. And I know that I'm not the only person who has gone through things and is in that season or in that situation where they're sitting in those thoughts just like, what's wrong with me that I have the worst luck in this area? Especially when you're someone who that's something that's really important to you and something that you feel like that God intended for you when he made you. You have this strong desire to be a wife and to love someone and to fill that role as outlined in Ephesians, what a wife and a woman should be. And also I do have emotional support hot chocolate for this, so I'm an official cringy YouTuber now. I'm gonna try not to drink it a ton. My sister and I were joking about that. I told her I was gonna take a sip of it just for her to make her laugh, but I'll try to pause it if I'm gonna do that. When you're someone who has that desire has that passion, and you're not someone who's necessarily even career driven, and that's kind of the one thing that you've always wanted is just to be in love and to fill that role for someone. And I know that's something that's looked down upon a lot in our society, that's very strength driven and career driven and independence driven, but there are still people who fall into that category, and that's something that they love and desire, and that's true for me. I'm in school, I have career aspirations, I know what it is that I want to do, I've talked about it before on this channel, but my one thing that I have just wanted deep down in my heart for so long now, and I actually feel as though that was kind of my dream and my drive and my purpose, is to be a wife, and is to be in that kind of relationship and have the honor and privilege of serving and submitting to a worthy man who's also fulfilling his biblical duty. I'm not really sure yet how in depth or in detail I want to get. Probably not very much so into the actual relationships and situationships themselves, but more just a very kind of brief outline of what had happened and how I was affected afterwards. So if there's anyone else who's going through a similar situation or is having a similar mindset as a result of even a completely different situation, they can feel connected to someone, and that they're not alone in that feeling of what's wrong with me, why is it always like this. So before we get started, I am 24 now. I never dated in high school. I was homeschooled. It was not even allowed in my household, even if there had been someone, but there really wasn't ever anyone to actually pursue something with. In college, there were people I liked, and I'm also not going to get into any high school or college crushes or even just friendships that kind of led to a sequence of disappointments or even establishing trust issues earlier on. I mean, they're not as relevant, and I want to stick with the the 3 individuals that I actually felt a depth of love for and how transformative it has been for me. I went into my first relationship when I was 22. I'm a millennium baby. I was born in 2000, so I turned the year, or the age of the year each year. So I met my first boyfriend when I was 22. It was the summer of 2023, so I turned 23 later that fall. But I met this boy at work. I work at Chick-fil-A. I took his order, and he came back and asked if I was single and asked if he could give me his number. And I had always denied people at work. I had never even admitted to being single to anyone at work, being approached, just not something I ever did. Never really felt comfortable doing it or interested in doing it. Typically I was just like, you know what, it's work, I'm not going to get into that while I'm here. But this boy, for whatever reason, this was following graduating from Liberty, so I was a fresh college graduate, and I was just back working that summer until I resumed classes at a university back home to return to finish my nursing degree. And when I met him, it was a mixture of just, he reminded me of someone that I would have met at school, and you know, I was in this season of life, there probably weren't many chances to meet someone, and here was this nice looking, very polite young man who came in and expressed interest, so I reciprocated. I let him give me his number, and we started talking. And I'm not going to go again into detail the actual relationship itself, but I will say it's noteworthy that this young man was a community service job. He was a first responder, so you know, served the community. He was military affiliated, so serving his country. He grew up locally in that town that I was working in, so you know, people around knew him. He had incredible character, like validation from people that we reached around and talked to. He'd grown up around there, gone to school around there. People knew him, no one had any issues with him. He was going to church with his captain, so you know, upstanding, good boy. So started dating that boy. He was my first relationship, first date, first boyfriend, all those things, which is very psychologically significant and emotionally significant. And the way it started out, we talked for I think about a month, but within like a week of talking, he took me out for the first time. He met my family earlier on just as a safety thing, because that's just really important, and that's the way I was raised. My family liked him, we got along well with everyone, started going out, started talking more. So I had met him in late May of 2023. So we were, you know, getting to know each other and starting to date, and then we talked for all of June. We made it official mid-July, so then we were together the rest of July, all of August, all of September, and here comes the first week of October 2023. So this was a few days before I turned 23, and I was in clinical, and I'm not sure, I'm not going to give any explicit detail or say out loud directly what this person did. I'll make inferences, and you know, if you pick up on it, then you'll know what he did, but I'm not going to say it out loud. I know YouTube has policies and stuff regarding what you can and can't say, and I also, if you know, there is someone watching this that's going to get really affected by it, or someone young stumbles across this, I'd rather not say out loud what he did. I was in clinical and received a phone call from this young man's brother, and he informed me that he had been arrested the night before, and I assumed in that moment, worst case scenario, drugs. I thought immediately when I heard it, he had been drunk driving. I did not think he was capable of anything evil. But it was some very messed up things that he'd been doing in regards to a very vulnerable population online. So that is how my first relationship ended. He and I had one phone conversation after he was arrested. It was actually on my birthday. He messaged me the night before my birthday through a communication system that the detention center offers. I didn't respond to any of those. I was only in communication with his brother, but I did have that last phone call with him in which I just made it clear we were not going to be continuing. That young man was arrested. We had our last phone call. Everything was cut off. And you know, when you have a situation like that, you don't have the luxury of, you know, reliving the sweet moments or looking back at pictures and messages. without feeling conviction doing that. So, I kind of had to cut out everything to do with him. I had to basically erase these very significant few months of my first everything, my first date, my first boyfriend, my first relationship, and had to, deal with the consequences of his actions in my life, even to a much lesser degree when your significant other gets into things online. I know so many girls know this. It really it destroys your mind. It destroys your self-image. I had such bad, I'm not to say body dysmorphia, because that's an actual clinical diagnosis for a much different thing, but body image issues and just the way I saw myself and the way I viewed my worth, the way I viewed any romantic relationship between a man and woman, the way I viewed people. This situation changed my outlook on everything. I no longer saw the world the way I used to. I questioned everyone and everything. I did not trust anyone or anything. Even people that I had known and trusted beforehand. Like, everybody lost their credibility. And, the way I saw myself was I was disgusted by myself. I was disgusted by relationships that I saw. There was so much trauma response to it, because now every association or memory that reminds me of that person is reminding me of his actions and his betrayal, and just that sickening time in my life where I literally lost 6 pounds in 2 weeks because I could not eat. And it was a really hard time, but that situation, it destroyed me, and I'm still not the person I was before I knew him, and I never will be the person I was before I knew him. The first situation is also significant because it led to the second. I'm going to touch on this one briefly. This was not an official relationship. This was a situationship, which is partially what makes it so hard, is that this was a friend of mine. He was someone I'd known for several years. We live in the same neighborhood, and we went to school together. That's actually how we met, was at school, not even at home, but at school. And we had a not on and off again friendship, as in we were on and off again friends, but just our paths didn't cross a ton, but whenever they did, they were good interactions. We had fun. We would help each other out. So if someone forgot something at home, the other one, would bring it up to school. Honestly, he drove me very crazy most of the time, but there were also some moments when he was able to be there for me through some things. He is, and I will still say this, he is gifted in the area of connecting with people, especially in really hard moments, in providing a sense of security and a sense of sanity. We had some great conversations, even outside of just him being there, but just having good, deep conversations, helping each other out as friends, neighbors. He likes to tease me a lot, which is why I say he drove me absolutely crazy. He drove me absolutely crazy. But he and I got a little closer after my breakup. There was quite a few people I reached out to for support in that time. He was one of them, but he was never at that point any more or less significant than anyone else I had gone to. But after one of the court cases for my ex, I had called my neighbor, just really needing someone that was strong and that was good at being calm and comforting, and she was able to, be there over the phone, because he was at school and I'd already graduated, and it was very helpful. And I think after that, there was some more communication back and forth, and he was able to be there for me through a lot of the healing process. He volunteered to be there for a lot of it, and we had some, great conversations, not just for me sharing things, but he shared some things also. But it was very healing, and I will not ever go back and say that it wasn't, and I'm very grateful he was there for that season. But what had happened was he was able to provide me during that period of time where I did not feel safe at all, ever, and he somehow was able to give me a safe place. And it got to the point where my safe place was this boy's embrace. He was able to be there as a friend, as a literal shoulder to cry on, and as, a pair of arms that would protect me from these awful emotions that I was feeling. And again, I'm so thankful to him for being there through that time and being that kind of friend through that time. It's what I needed, and it was very helpful. As time passed and I healed more, the time we spent together was no longer, just this. It wasn't just because he was trying to help me, because we were also friends at the same time, but I got to the point where, you know, we were enjoying each other's company, and we were enjoying the physicality that what initially started as comfort had led to. With time, started to develop feelings. Again, this was a friend and someone who had been there for me, and I just started to see him in a new light. And he had his own degree of interest and attraction, but it was never the same, because I started to want more and a future. And while he had his own feelings and own interest, it was never to the point where he actually wanted a future with that for his own reasons. I'm not going to share his story or what had happened in his life that led him to be, you know, hesitant to engage in a relationship after the kind of dynamic we'd shared. But for whatever reasons, he did not want to proceed past his friendship, and that is fine. But at that point, we failed to put some boundaries into place. I say we because I do take accountability. For my own sake, I could have also put boundaries into place at this point and be like, you know, as great as this is, I need to protect my own heart, especially after what had just happened. But also for him being a man, and this is something I talked to about with friends and family, that he had a higher responsibility, as knowing what I had gone through, and knowing what I was starting to feel for him, should have put boundaries in place to protect me, and he did not, which, you know, we all have our own weaknesses and our own struggles. And what really hurt with how this situation ended wasn't even that, you know, we got into some habits that weren't the greatest. It's how things ended with it. As you know, we failed to set boundaries in place. We failed to, you know, like, maybe we should be a bit more careful. There was just a lot of flirting and a lot of, even if by the world standards we never did anything wrong, it was just what's right with it and what's wise with this, and there was nothing right or wise about what we were doing. And I got to a point where I realized I needed to lead us to take a step back, because clearly he wasn't going to. And at that point, our friendship had kind of gotten more one-sided in terms of communication. I was reaching out a lot more than he was. So I said to myself, I'm going to take a step back and wait for him to reach out. And next time we make plans to hang out, we're going to have to take a step back and put some boundaries in place, like, hey, we need to adjust what this looks like. And what was really hard is, after I stopped reaching out, which was like the end of spring this year, he never reached out again. And to this day, I have not spoken to this guy, who was, you know, for several years a friend of mine, and who still to this day is my neighbor, and who had been there for me through such hard months, and we'd really bonded with each other and really shared a good connection, regardless if it was ever going to be more than a friendship. You know, we are brothers and sisters in Christ, and I had faith that even when that season ended, you know, we'd still be there for each other, we'd still speak, but, you know, he failed to ever even reach out again, and, you know, never even followed up on what happened. And I'm close to his family still, and his mother provided some insight in terms of, you know, he was doing what he thought was right for me when I stopped reaching out. But I see it as, you know, he and I knew each other pretty well, and he knew that disappearing was the worst thing he could ever do to me, especially after what had happened with my ex, and how one day he was there, and the next day that version of him was dead. And just a past, you know, moving around a lot, but not even that, just a lot of friendships that had ended with somebody just fading away. And he knew that was the worst thing he could possibly do. And he had also told me that if anything ever changed, he would tell me in terms of either him wanting now to move forward past friendship, or if he was deciding to do that with someone else. And he is now in a relationship and had never even told me when that changed. So that was a hard situation, especially to follow my relationship. Was, you know, my friend kind of at the end feeling like using me until he found something better, and taking advantage of my feelings for him and my trust in him following a very hard situation. And I have no resentment towards this guy. I'll admit I'm angry, and I'm finally able to process more of that anger now, but I have nothing but love for him. And he's a good guy. Mature? Maybe not, but, you know, good heart, good intentions, that just got skewed along the way and had not properly dealt with whatever else he'd been through, and it kind of affected his own judgment and his own decision making, and hurt me. And I don't think he has any clue to this day how badly he did hurt me. But towards the end of that situation, now we get into the really hard one. And yeah, the first one was the most traumatic, but this one it's hard. So, towards the end of my neighbor and I's friendship, situationship, all that had happened, when I kind of felt things dwindling down and knew we were going to have to adjust some things, and I wasn't going to wait on him indefinitely to figure out if he wanted to change his mind ever or not. And I decided to put myself out there again. I talked to my mom about it, and we decided, let's try the online dating thing. And I had been against online dating my whole life. I thought it was, super dangerous, super sketchy, super weird. But I had some close friends who had met via online dating and to this day are still going strong. So, my mom and I decided if I do it safely, there's no harm in trying it. So I set up that account kind of while that season with my neighbor was winding off. This is kind of before we completely lost contact, but it's kind of leading up to it. And, I prayed, God, if there's someone else you have out there for me besides this friend, this neighbor, and he's going to come to me through this source, you're going to have to make it so clear if this one is meant for me. If this is the man you want me to now go and not pursue, but, be pursued by and to reciprocate the interest, if this is someone that you want me to love and be married to, you have to make it so clear, because I've been hurt now twice and I'm still not completely over this other situation, and I almost didn't want anything to work out. And when I set up online dating, I wanted my neighbor to snap out of it, because I really thought that we had such a good connection and that he needed to figure that out. I matched with a boy on there. Man, this is the one I will call a man out of all three of these. Matched with him my first day on there, and it was the evening of my first day. I'd already matched with a few people, but this one, he shared his testimony almost right away, and the level of detail in what he'd written and the way he could just pull these deep kind of unknown scriptures out and apply it to a story was very genuine, and I had no doubt that what he was saying was fabricated or being said to appeal to me, because it had been made very clear in my bio that I was a Christian. And he and I started to message a lot. We started to call within the first few days, and our first phone call lasted 5 hours and only stopped because it was 3 a.m. And we'd both been through a lot. He had a hard past, and you're already a little bit familiar with my relationship past. So no, we were trying to take things slow and just be friends for a while, but there was just an interest that started to grow, and it was really hard for me as I felt this kind of happening, because I was so scared of getting hurt again, because I had just gotten crushed 2 times in a row, and I prayed so much, God, you have to make it clear if this is right, because I do not want to get into something else that's not going to be right, and that's going to end with me in pieces again. But we met up with my family present, and it was really good. And then there was another time he came down here to my family's house, and that's really when I felt, for the first time in my life, because I'm a very anxious person, but I felt this peace just tell everything in me to just calm down. And it was every anxiety went quiet, every fear went quiet, my trauma for just a moment of time went quiet. And it was when he was here with my family, and that weekend was, again, the most peaceful I've ever felt. And he and I decided at that point, let's go ahead and make this official and just see where God takes it. And actually give me my first kiss, because I had withheld that from both my relationship and situationship. That was something that I had not given up at that point. I'm very conservative, traditional, and I know not everybody has had the same story. Not even these boys had the same story as me, in terms of how much they wanted to save, or if they'd saved anything at all. But just for me personally, I was blessed enough to be raised in a household that made it clear that was important and helped me keep those guidelines for myself. So those are just lines I'd never crossed before, but gave him that first kiss, and I don't regret it. It was beautiful. It was so sweet and so cute. And he and I dated for a few months, and it was literally the happiest I've ever been. I'm going to start getting emotional soon. There was a lot of things I had to confront in terms of my trauma, and there was a lot of trust issues, and I'm not saying it was perfect, that I always felt really, really peaceful or really okay with it. But overall, I had never felt someone that I had such a drive to just submit to and serve the way that I've spent my life studying. And I've never had someone love me and treat me a way that I felt like I wasn't worthy of, and that's how I felt. The way he took care of me and comforted me and looked after me, I did not feel worthy of it. And I go to scriptures, and the relationship between a man and woman who are romantically involved is supposed to be that, Christ and the church. And the church, being the bride of Christ, is supposed to submit to and to serve and honor. And then the man who's representing Christ is supposed to just adore and love and protect the way God does us. And we don't deserve it. So I think in a good man-woman relationship that's moving towards marriage, it's quite often you're not going to feel worthy of it. And aside from us just really feeling those biblical roles, I also felt as though my faith was being made so much stronger and so much sharper, and he was someone that I could go to with like theological questions or just scriptural questions, and he was someone that incessantly pointed me back to the Word and back to the Lord. And really, out of all the relationships or situationships or whatever that I'd been in, he was the only one that was really doing that. And we read the Bible together, did Bible studies together, we prayed together every night over FaceTime before we went to bed. And it was just I felt pushed towards being the best version of myself. And he had told me similar things, that I was making him want to be like the best version of himself, and I was pushing him to be better. And then we did get to a point a couple months in where he was struggling with some doubts and just double-mindedness and going back and forth that he apparently had felt towards the beginning, which was something I'd also felt towards the beginning, just in terms of dealing with my fear and trauma and really having a hard time trusting anything good coming out of this or being able to trust him. But he had his own things come up, and he came down and scared me because I got hit with the "we need to talk," and then he drove down because we were long distance, and we met up at a park and we talked about things. And again, I don't want to give too much detail into the actual relationship, but we got into the point where I told him, like, if you really don't want this and you're not happy with this, you don't want me, then go now, because I can't do this again. So if you think already that you don't want me, then you need to go. But if it's really just something with yourself that you feel like you need to work on, and there's something you're struggling with, then we could also work through that together. And a relationship is a team effort. We help each other through our weaknesses and struggles. We together, grounded in the Lord, will work through those things together. And I kind of went back to that first weekend he'd come down to my family's house, where he had actually prayed on the drive down for God to give us overwhelming peace if it was right, and overwhelming discomfort if it wasn't. We both felt so peaceful, which that story I mentioned previously of me feeling really peaceful, I didn't know at the time that he'd prayed for that. So I kind of brought him back to that, and I was like, from that moment, I felt so much peace moving forward with you, even with my own, fears and doubts. And I always felt that it was right, and that was within the will of God, because, you make me a better person, and you make me want to move farther in my faith and grow more in my faith. So you feel like home to me, and for me, you are worth working through these things for. But again, if you don't want me, then go. But I do think if you actually want this, that we could try to work through it together. And once he was kind of presented with that angle, so I guess that was just an angle he'd never had before, not in his past relationships, because he'd only dated before his faith in the past. And he got to the conclusion during that conversation that he loved me, and that's one of the reasons why he was struggling so much just with going back and forth, because he wanted to make sure that I had what was best for me, and that I had someone who wanted me as much as I deserved to be wanted. And he wanted to try to work through things and to make things happen, and he assured me so many times that night, and he had this new kind of strength and peace come over him, and he was like, yes, this is not the conclusion I thought we were going to get to, but this is what I want to work through this. I love you, I'm all in for you, let's make this work. And I asked him several times, are you sure about that? I got affirmation each time. Next time I was up at his family's house, there was a night when I was struggling a lot with my own doubts again, and just my fear. Again, I didn't have doubts about what I felt for him. It was just so much trust issues and so much trauma. And I was approaching that time of year that my ex was arrested. And I remember asking him or talking to him, and I told him, this time of year is coming, and I just have this sick feeling that it's all going to happen again. And not that he was going to stoop to the level of evil that my ex had, because he's an amazing character, amazing man, and he would never do that. But it was just the fear of that loss again, one day having something and the next day having it being torn away from me. And I was sitting there with him, like, in his arms crying and being like, I feel like this is the last time we're gonna be like this. And you're gonna be gone when this week comes around. It was just such a weird sixth sense, but, you know, I kind of attributed it just to trauma. And he assured me that he was not gonna go anywhere. He made me look at him and told me he was not gonna go anywhere. He was not leaving. That I was his no matter what. And that he loved me. And that everything was gonna be okay. And again and again, I'm not leaving, I'm not going anywhere, you are mine no matter what, and I love you. And a couple weeks later, I get a FaceTime call, and he's ending it. It was kind of the same things that had happened a month before, but instead of, you know, being honest when those things came up, he had chosen to tell me everything was okay, because there had been times over the next 2 weeks after we had that talk and the talk at his house, and it had been a month since the part conversation. Every time I'd brought things up or I'd noticed a difference, he'd always assured me it was okay, so he chose to assure me everything was fine. And anytime I asked if I needed to adjust something, it was always, no, everything, you're doing everything fine, like, whatever. And never admitted to anything being wrong until the afternoon that he broke up with me over a FaceTime call. 2 hours of both of us sobbing, and for, you know, his reasons, he did not think I deserved having someone who was as back and forth and doubtful about the relationship as he was. And I had my own beliefs about that. I've already kind of talked about the fruit of the relationship and how biblical it was and the peace that God had given before, but I also think that because he'd wrestled so much as going back and forth, he was never just content to move forward with the peace that God had given him. I think he felt the need to feel it again and again, and if he didn't, then he thought he was doing something wrong. But, you know, he had his reasons, his doubts, and we ended it. And this one was different because there was, you know, he wanted to remain friends and remain in contact. And there's been a little bit of contact. Just right now I'm being really careful with it because where I stand currently, it's been over a month since we broke up, which also, I didn't mention this, he broke up with me on the same day my first ex was arrested. So I was 1000% right that night at his house when I said, this is the last time we're going to be like this, and you're going to leave me the same way he did. Those fears were right. And again, I'm not going to go too detailed of any other conversations we'd had since then, but just I give those for a little context as to why it was so devastating and why I was so I felt so deceived and so mocked by the whole situation, especially 3 times in a row, and at the same time of year, because there had been an explicit promise made 2 nights before the breakup that I would not have to face this week alone again, and yet I had to because he left me. As I was saying before I got on the rabbit trail about what day it was, where I stand a month later, or over a month later, it's been like a month and a week now, I am still in love with him, and that's the reason right now why communication and friendship isn't smart, because we're not just friends. If every time I see you, I'm still thinking about how you are the man I would love to marry and love to raise my children, because I can't imagine someone being a better father than you. But regardless, that's kind of why we've been really limited in that, but or I'm choosing to leave it really limited for now. And I also don't want to spend too much time debunking, you know, his side of the story, because that's his own business, that's his feelings, and those are valid. But it did help me kind of learn how to really analyze situations apart from emotion, because, you know, I'm not the one who was feeling those doubts, so I'm able to look at it from this other perspective and be like, okay, how can we actually find out what's going on here? And I've actually learned a lot from doing that, and so I'd like to share that probably in a different video that's less about him, because I don't want to be sitting there and, you know, attacking his decision. More so, I would probably just kind of use that as an example to guide a discussion and explaining that more. I did lose the best thing that God has ever given me, you know, aside from my salvation and my family. And I tell all these stories to kind of explain this place I'm in now, where, you know, my first relationship, first official relationship, was the sickest addiction you can think of having was more important than me, because that was something that he engaged in. And even if I'm the one that ended the relationship because he didn't want to, he wanted to keep going. But you know what I mean, if you know anything about me or looked at my channel before, like, I want to work as a forensic saint, and I'm not going to actually say what those words stand for because I know YouTube gets weird about it, and I think I've said it before in other videos, so you can check out that one if you want to see. But that love, that kind of evil, even if it wasn't exactly the same thing, that area of evil is the kind that I'm choosing to fight against in my career, and he knew that. So to have someone pick that or do that and think that they could, you know, go to church and have your sweet little church-going girlfriend beside them and lead this life at the same time, and the kind of effect it had on my view of myself and on people and on relationships and on the world, like, it was detrimental, and I'm still trying to figure out how to sort that out. But you know, if there's anyone out there who's, you know, had partners with certain addictions, or even if they've struggled with it themselves, and now they have like the way they view themselves is messed up, the way they view anything is messed up, like, my heart goes out to you. And you know, you're not the only one who's been affected that way. Same way I'm not the only one. And to have that situation, and then have your friend and someone you trusted, your neighbor, your shoulder to cry on, use you essentially, and use your trauma and your trust and your love for them, even if it wasn't out of malicious intent and it wasn't like dreamt up that way and done that way. At the end of the day, even if the intent wasn't to do that, it was still done. So to have your friend do that to you and then disappear from your life and not even bother to tell you that he was going or that he'd found someone else, like, and have that happen right after, just another knife in the soul. And then to fall in love with someone who God brought into your life and opened every door with and every window with and made it so clear, even when you didn't want it, and you're like, no. First of all, I said never again a stranger, because of my first ex, because he's a stranger I met at work. I said never a stranger. I'd said before, never online. And then after my neighbor, I said no one but him. So I said never, never, never. And then God said yes, and gave me him, and you know, went against everything that I'd personally believed in, and made everything so clear, and gave me peace for the first time in my life, and started to heal things, and started to very slowly heal my trust issues, and make me feel like that one day I would actually be able to be in a loving romantic relationship and not feel dirty in it, and to be married to someone that I just adored and respected as much as him, and then to have that person promise to never leave you and then do it a month later, and to do it on the worst day possible, and to break every promise they ever made you. And now you're just sitting here still feeling in your heart that there's no one else in the world you want, and trying to find that balance between not waiting on that guy, but waiting on God to make it clear, yes, it is that guy. Keep working on yourself, keep leaning on me, and he will come back when it's ready. Or waiting him to say, you know what, it's not him, and here's someone else that I do have for you. And I'm in this place where I'm fighting so much with the enemy's lies of I'm the problem because he chose, I'm not going to say the word, but I'm pretty sure you know what it is. And then this other one chose whatever thing, and then ended up choosing another person. And then this one chose his own past and his own fears over you. To have people repeatedly not love you enough to want you, and not want you enough to stay, especially when you're a Christian woman that desires that more than, you know, anything aside from a glorified relationship with the Lord. It destroys you and it breaks your heart, and you feel so empty and so just used and run over and without any energy left to keep going. So, and something else that's, I think, so defeating about being in this position is we know already that we're going to go through things in life, and there are going to be hard times and really difficult things, but it gets frustrating when the thing that happens is losing your support, and then it's just followed by life hitting you, and you just wonder, why can't I just have someone to go through this with? Especially when there's so many people around you who have someone that's standing by them and who's helping them through it. And it's not that, you know, you're alone completely. You have your family, you have your friends, but there's something very different and very special about that person, your man, or if you're a guy watching this, that girl, and that one person that's filling in all your empty spots, and is your strength when you're weak, or your softness when you're hard. And it's a very different kind of dynamic, especially something I've seen a lot with myself and just with some other women, is the kind of earthly security that gives you, that kind of the fact that there's someone who's strong, and I don't mean just like physically strong, but who's just emotionally stoic, because we're more emotional creatures naturally. This is how we were made. But to have someone who's a bit more stoic in that area, and who's wanting to just shelter you and to protect you and to be there for you and be your stronghold and be your backbone when you're weak, because we all have moments when we're weak, and to never have that, and have that person who was that for you leave you, and then just have life hammer you again and again, and you're like, why does no one wanted to stand by me in this, and why does nobody love me enough to protect me? Why does everybody have to, for whatever excuse, leave me? And even if he says, I'm doing this for you because you deserve better, you're still leaving me. And I remember journaling one time, I said, leaving me will never be what's best for me. So, yeah, we're gonna go through things, but it's exhausting when that thing is always ending up alone again, and having to face all the difficulties of life, without your person. And right after this breakup, which conveniently happened at a very traumatic time, within a week or two after that breakup, I found out that my first ex is potentially out of jail. And then I had a loved one hospitalized for really, scary things. And I'm also in nursing school, which in and of itself is super stressful. And there's just been a lot of other little life things that have happened at this time that I'm trying to heal and trying to process. My little warm, cozy blanket being ripped off me and leaving me alone in the cold, and it ends up being a lot of little things at once. And that's one of the hard things I think about breakups is, not just mourning the breakup itself, but now having to do everything alone and having to face all these things from what feels like a place of being alone. I share that story to explain this mentality that I'm in, and I share those experiences and those men. So if you're in any situation, even if it's nothing like those stories, but either way you've been heartbroken and left, or you've had to leave because of some of those choices, I was the one that had to leave. You're not alone in that. And there's so many things we can learn from this, and I can't wait to kind of start some videos explaining what I've learned from this and how we can continue to move forward, and even to reflect on the good aspects of all these relationships, because there was good and beauty in each of them. But I'm already running up high on time on this clip again, so I am going to have to, I think, wrap this one up. I'll get more into the dissection of the last breakup, not the personal situation, but just an external, almost objective view on how to decipher thoughts when you feel like you aren't being given, actual precise guidance by God, and how you can look at the fruit of something versus, the root of the fear and the doubt. So I'll get into that in another video, but for now, thank you so much for listening to this unfortunate story of my relationship traumas and heartbreak. I hope you know that wherever you are, whoever you are loved, you are not alone, and you are more precious than rubies. Thank you again for listening, and I hope you have a good night.